Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Walking Between Shadows. We're your host. I'm Ben.
I'm Taryn.
And this week, we're going to leave the 13th District of Tennessee. We're going to move to the Kansas City area with a story because it's not too dissimilar than what we've been doing in the 13th District and what we've been covering there. A lot of the same types of actions, not just from the victims of crime, but from, the professionals.
Yes.
So, with that being said, I want to start out by saying, we appreciate our audience. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and click that notifications bell. But also, it's important that you share these videos and these podcasts wherever you find them, either on YouTube or um, most all of the popular platforms like Google Podcast, um, Apple Podcast, Spotify, etc. And so that's the important part here is that you share these videos and podcasts to get the word out and to keep these cases relevant. We've always said this before that, somebody out there knows something. And so that's what makes it important to share
No,
is,
they know something.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I want to frame this case up for you and, Taryn, then you can go into the details of it.
That's right.
Okay. So I want people to kind of get their heads wrapped around that this is a major metro area and, you know, not long after 9/11 had happened. And I would say that the air had changed for Muslims as a result of 9/11. And you started seeing a lot of problems with harassment and stuff like that. I mean, I was in the military at the time, and some of us would even take a step back and be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what's the intention here?
Right.
And
Did it seem like police were? I mean, you were in the military, so you were around kind of something like that, right?
well, yeah, I mean, we interacted publicly, we went out in town and stuff like that, but we mostly were on a base. So we were kind of sheltered from what was happening,
Yeah.
in a big way. So I can't say that that was the experience that I had being in the military and being on base. And then, of course, at the time I was on special assignment where I was working in a place in Africa where you didn't have a base. You didn't have that type of issue. And in fact, the community I was living in at the time was Muslim.
Okay.
And I mean, the Islamic faith was about 80% of the populace there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And every day we were, awakened to the call to prayer and, these loudspeakers all over the city and then again doing the call to prayer every day.
Right.
And so we didn't get an air about us that we had a chip on our shoulder because of being in that type of community.
Right.
And it was amazing. And I say amazing is a very sad situation, but it was amazing how many people of that faith that worked for us
Mm-hmm.
and we relied on daily to live that came to us and was so apologetic, and they're so far removed from what had happened,
Oh, exactly.
you
Yes.
know, but it's in their faith, to understand that, they need to be humbled to a situation that was caused by a few.
Mm-hmm. That's sad.
And one of the guys that actually worked in our house every day. I mean, this guy had access to our house. You know, he worked side by side or shoulder to shoulder to all of us,
Right.
24/7, more or less. And I buried his father 3 times at least. And that's kind of a funny story. Yeah, that's kind of a funny story. But he would come to me or anybody else that was there, American employees, and say, "Oh, my father, he is so sick.
Oh.
He is passed away. I need money.
Yeah.
I have to bury him."
Yeah.
And over there, the exchange rate was astronomical. So like $10 could get you through a month. And
Mm.
so we all would donate to the cause, right?
Right.
And it was always the new guy that came to town that they'd go to first. They'd warn everybody else out with him that, oh, it's my father, he is so sick.
Yeah.
Um, and finally I got to the point where I was like, "Hey, if you need grocery money, just say so,"
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many babies I paid for being birthed, how many, family members I paid for being buried,
Yeah.
or gas money or whatever.
Sure.
But that's okay. It was nothing. But when it came to the post 9/11 situation that I found myself in, at least the community I was in was very humble to it. Now we had some falling out. There were incidents that happened along the way, and that's just the nature of humanity. But here in the United States, this particular case deals with that in that, you know, the victim in this case, this all started out probably as a result of that. It started out as some cop that said, there's a little Muslim kid,
Hmm.
and that little 12, 13-year-old Muslim kid had something to do with that in New York.
Hmm.
And that's the mindset that they got treated with. And that sickens me.
Yes.
And it always did. So imagine yourself in the sweltering heat of midsummer in an urban area like Kansas City. And you and a friend are just happy go lucky. Yeah, you're of the age where you start doing things, you start scheming with stuff. And
You do kid things. I mean, yeah, you might do something that might take a little too far, but it's pretty normal.
yeah, and what I mean is like, smoking cigarettes,
Sure.
drinking beer.
Oh yeah, I couldn't tell you how many Marlboros I smoked up when I was a kid.
Well, I had to smoke Virginia Slim, so yuck.
Just
But anyway, I mean,
God.
here you are with your friend. You're 12, 13 years old. You've got a little weed or something like that. But you're just minding your business. You're being kids.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, this figure of authority comes at you from the very worst and wrong perspective they can.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's where I get sideways with the way police treat people sometimes.
Hmm.
Now, I support the police, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
They're a very necessary part of society, just
Yes.
like anything else that we have to have. Firemen, police, whatever, paramedics. But I find that more often than not, in cases like this, a cop has really stepped outside the boundaries of their authority.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so with that being said, that's the situation we're in here. So
Yes.
tell us about Noelle.
So Noelle Ishkuntana grew up in Kansas City, and she was the youngest of 7 kids. So big family. We talked about her being Middle Eastern. Her father's Middle Eastern. Mother is actually from Ireland. So I mean, but they were all raised in this strict Muslim faith. Um, I guess it was around 12 or 13 years old. We go to the story you started this out with. She is walking down the road with a friend of hers, and a police officer comes up on her. They find a little bit of weed on her and her on Noelle and her friend, and he says, "If you do this for me, I will not tell your mother."
Mm-hmm.
And it started a chain of events that just, I can say, ended Noelle's life.
Yeah.
I can easily say that
Yeah.
because they asked her to become a confidential
At
informant.
12 years old, 13, they asked her to be a CI
Right.
and knew full well what they were about to put her through.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course they know.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they knew.
Mm-hmm.
So she becomes a pretty strong drug user
Mm-hmm.
in her teens. All throughout her teens, early 20s, she's got a lot of issues going on, and you can imagine being a CI for the police,
Mm-hmm.
and probably more than anything, dealing with drugs. You know, I think that's pretty much the only thing they have to deal with is drugs.
Yeah.
So she was doing them, and she was given permission to do them. And not only was she given permission,
Mm-hmm.
that was her lifestyle. So I mean, there was a lot going on.
Well, and this or these officers convinced her not to tell her mother.
Right. And anybody that tells a child not to tell their parents, they're up to no good.
Yeah, and that'll lead to another point you make later on about another law, right?
Right.
Okay.
So she's going through her teens, early teens even.
Mhm.
and into her early 20s, and she's got a major addiction, and she's working for the police, and she's got a baby in 2014. And there's a lot of turmoil after her daughter's born. So she has a little girl, and she names her after her mother. So her daughter's name is Bridget, and Noelle's mother's name is Bridget.
Mhm.
They call the baby Biddy. And Noelle knew that she was not equipped to take care of a child. The
Mhm.
life she was living, she did stay clean while she was pregnant, but after she had her daughter, it got worse. It got worse.
Yeah.
In and out of, here's what I have to say about informants. It usually seems like they get in trouble doing something.
Mhm.
They'll go into jail and spend a little while in there and usually get released ROR
Mhm.
and back right out to it.
Yeah.
Um, Not a whole lot of charges. It doesn't seem like it goes through the judge or anything like that. It's just like
Right.
open the door, let them out the back.
Yeah, let 'em out the back
Let them
door.
out the back door.
Uh-huh.
And that's how it was for Noelle. And her drug of choice was meth. So you can imagine the outbursts that she had put upon her family during these times. And it
Mhm.
caused a lot of turmoil between Bridget and Noelle.
Mhm.
Now, Bridget did have custody, and Noelle did give custody of her daughter to Bridget. So she was raising this daughter, but there was even a point where Bridget had to file a restraining order against Noelle because of her outbursts and her behaviors. And Bridget knew she had to protect the baby. She had to protect this innocent child,
Yeah.
but still very much loved her daughter.
Mhm.
And that seems to be anyone that has a child that's involved with addiction. These parents go to the end of the earth to try to save their child. And it's tough,
Mhm.
especially if you think about her being a CI and be given these drugs and given permission
Yeah,
to
and
do
working deals and yeah, putting
yeah,
herself in harm's way with other parties and
right.
just nasty
And
folks.
I mean, like, she started off bad anyway, because I mean, we talked about her being Middle Eastern and Muslim and how people were treating her, but she also struggled with mental health issues even very young. She
Yeah.
was in um, special ed courses as a child, and she used to tell people that she rode the short bus, but it never did hold her back. So, yeah. And, these things about her, like I have gotten to know Noelle over the past couple of weeks researching this, and
Mhm.
um, I love her. I think she had a very hard life
Mhm.
and not much softness.
Yeah.
But her mother explained her as well. I asked her mom, I said, what's her favorite color? What's Noelle's favorite color? And she said, it's red. And that fit what I thought Noelle was like. Like she entered the room and the temperature changed, and she just was charismatic and happy when she was not
Mhm.
completely twisted on drugs.
Yeah.
So Bridget and and Noelle's siblings, they fought through all this addiction to try to pull her Noelle out.
Yeah.
Where are you in there?
Yeah.
She ends up getting with a man um, the last several years of her life,
Mhm.
and it was a very abusive relationship.
Mhm.
He put her in the hospital at one time, tried to pull her ears off and her tongue out of her mouth. Um, Verbally abusive, mentally abusive.
Mhm.
Both of them using drugs.
Was he Muslim?
No, no, I don't believe he was Muslim.
Mhm.
And she had pretty much, as with addiction goes, you get away from those things that are your foundation. And so she wasn't practicing her faith, and she was too wrapped up in the life of drugs and being a confidential informant and being abused and just surviving.
Mhm.
I think her life was completely survival.
Yeah.
Um, but in like around March of 20, well, let me take that back. even after the restraining order and things, and Bridget fighting all these years, in 2017 on Christmas Eve, Bridget and Noelle did mend their relationship. And Bridget's very thankful for that because you need that. You need that to carry on.
Mm-hmm.
So in March, around March of 2018, Noelle gets arrested for a driving violation. And I believe it was like violation of probation too. So
Mm-hmm.
she had been on probation for something and she got caught got a
Yeah.
driving violation and they put her in jail. I don't know how much time she got, but I know she did about 54 days in jail. And during the time in jail, she would call her mother regularly and tell her, I'm not in a normal cell. That's one thing Noelle told her mother. I'm not in my normal cell. So, I mean, there goes, they just must have put her, in a,
He just socked her away somewhere.
they either that or they just put her in their general population instead of
Oh,
putting
I
her
see what you're
alone.
saying.
Right. So
Yeah.
she was probably in their general population.
So most of the time, CIs are they are socked away. They're
They're
put
in their
somewhere
private
else.
cell,
Yeah.
like a private cell.
But in this case, she was thrown into GP because
I don't
who
know.
knows?
I
Yeah.
don't know if this is the burning out of an
Yep.
informant,
Yep.
but she's using somebody else's account when she calls Bridget. So
Mm-hmm.
that makes me think she maybe had been in general population. And Bridget couldn't understand why she was doing that, but she was. But she was also telling her mother that she was wanting to get back into her religion,
Right.
change her life,
Mm-hmm.
get off all this mess. She was tired.
Mm-hmm.
And she told she told Bridget, I have a debt I have to pay first. Before I can do anything else, I have to pay this debt. And Bridget told her, you've already paid your debts. I mean, it's no.
Mm-hmm.
You've paid with your body, your mind, your daughter. You don't have anything.
Yeah.
Just come home.
Yeah.
So she's released in June, the very beginning of June. And nobody knows. She's released from jail, and nobody knew she was being released, and she was released early. And most of the time, Noelle was living with her sister,
Mm-hmm.
but she would go, from the streets to her boyfriends to her sisters.
Yeah. She was still interacting with that guy.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And he was living like on this property that had the main house on it, and there was people that owned that house, and there was like a shed in the backyard,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's where Noelle's boyfriend stayed, was in this shed.
Yeah.
Noelle gets out, and she's out of jail, and 24 hours later, she is found hanging in a tree in
Mm-hmm.
the back of this yard,
Mm-hmm.
beside this shed of her boyfriend's. He wasn't the one that found her. There were some witnesses that were at an abandoned school behind this property that saw her,
Yeah.
and police did come and they cut her down. So she was there. I believe her feet were barely touching the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And they ruled this pretty quickly an unsuspicious suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I don't know with unsuspicious suicides if they send them to autopsy, but I believe, don't you?
I don't know. It varies what the rules are. I think if they're under a certain age, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are that they're
Hmm.
deceased, that has to be investigated.
Right. So they send her off for this, but they never did call her family. They never called Noelle's family.
So they never reached out at least to her mother
No,
or her sister who she'd been talking to in jail,
no.
and they knew who they were.
Oh yeah, they know.
Yeah.
Um, but the boyfriend, Noelle's boyfriend, did call the family and leave voicemails,
Mm-hmm.
crazy voicemails,
Mm-hmm.
scary voicemails. He said the first voicemail was like, they killed her. My baby's dead. They shot her up with ketamine. So Bridget and Noelle's family are you know looking for her, calling and trying to find what's going on. Is her boyfriend just messed up right now? Did she even get released from jail? So they call the jail, they call the hospitals. Finally, they called the morgue.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm wondering if they called police during this time,
I'm sure they
and
did.
they
I
just didn't
mean,
tell them. Okay.
That's one of the points we're making here. Potentially, we don't know what that truth is, but
Right.
could be.
So they did not call, and she calls the morgue, and the morgue has to be the ones to tell Noelle's mother that they have her there.
Yeah.
That I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine.
Well, I mean, that goes back to what I mentioned earlier. You know, the police force is there to serve and protect, and I wouldn't think that Bridget wouldn't call the police.
So here's my question. And the morgue did give, so my question is, was she not sent off for an autopsy? If she was at the morgue when they called,
Yeah, I don't know.
it makes me feel like they didn't do an autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Muslim faith, um, they do a ceremony at a family member's when they decease that they it's called body washing,
Yeah.
and they just clean the whole body, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they start at the feet and the
Well,
women.
there's a process to the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
And it's done by family and friends, or just family. Usually, the community has someone designated to organize who is going to participate in that ceremony.
Or
And
women
it's,
from the mosque will come and do
yeah,
that, right?
yeah. And it's supposed to happen within 24 hours of your passing. So, um, again, going back to some of my experiences overseas, we had a very tragic incident that happened in Africa where a school bus from the American school, which for those that don't understand that, when there's an embassy present in a foreign country, there's usually a school for the kids of the staff of the embassy. And in our case, the American school would allow kids from other embassies of other nations to come and attend the American school.
Okay.
And in this particular case, these kids went on a field trip that was a few hours away in a bus, and I think there were about 30 of them, kids and chaperones and the bus driver and everybody. I think it was about 30. But in this case, one of the kids that died as a result of the accident was the son of the ambassador of Morocco
Mhm.
to this foreign country that I was working in. I just remember hearing that that child was to be buried by sundown of that day.
Really? And they were
Yeah.
doing the body washing ceremony,
Yeah,
okay.
they did a body washing ceremony, and basically what it entails is an odd number of applications of clean water and basic soap to the body
Mhm.
and rinsing it until the water runs clean. Okay, so but it's an odd number.
Mhm.
You do it 3, 5, 7,
Mhm.
and once that happens, the body's dried off and then wrapped in shrouds. Their arms are crossed. I think it's left over right, as if in prayer.
Okay.
And women, their hair is usually braided and arranged under their head.
Mm.
And again, these shrouds are tied together with other strips of cloth, and they're buried directly in the ground.
To never be touched again, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. And they're buried directly in the ground.
So
They're
yeah, it makes me wonder what time frame they had to do an autopsy, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
during the body washing. So Bridget was a part of this along with Noelle's sibling sisters,
mm-hmm,
and they noticed that she had still had leaves and dirt and blood all in her on the back of her head.
mm-hmm,
Now, if she hung herself, why would there be blood on the back of her head? Unless she maybe hit the tree, I don't know.
mm-hmm.
This is me speculating, and I don't mean to get graphic with it. She also had a tube in her mouth still from where they had taken her from the scene to the hospital, and I
Mm-hmm.
guess from there to the morgue
Yeah,
or
and this
the
tube was
autopsy.
where they intubated her. They're
Right,
trying to
right.
rescue breathing.
But that was still left from the hospital and or the scene, even if they tried it at the scene.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and um, what else was there? Oh, so her feet were not swollen.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing that really is a sign of someone hanging themselves.
Mhm.
Um, their feet and their ankles usually swell. And Bridget told me that when she was washing her daughter's feet, that her ankles were actually smaller than they've ever been. She said, we used to call her, what is it, the big ankles,
Cankle.
they would make fun of her and her sister,
And she had
they,
cankles.
they would say that, but she said her ankles actually looked better than ever. Like there was no swelling, there was no ligature marks. So they did this ceremony in Bridget. I can't imagine how tough that would be. I
Well,
mean,
it's a very beautiful thing.
and that's what she
It
said,
it is a ceremony of the ultimate respect.
right? You give them that dignity in
Mhm.
their death,
Mhm.
something that she was not given in
Right.
life,
Right.
and not given in justice because, you know, they didn't call, and it doesn't seem like there was much of an investigation. When Bridget did finally talk to the police and ask them for the autopsy report or ask them for the crime scene photos, they said, well, we didn't have any crime scene photos.
Whatever.
Our camera wasn't working. We
Yeah,
didn't
there
have any
wasn't but
working
one
cameras.
cop there and, one car. All these supplies were not available. Whatever.
Right.
I'm not buying it.
I'm not buying it either. So, I mean, that's another thing that still,
Mhm.
there's no answers on that. And here it is 6 years later now,
Mhm.
and there's no answers. She did say during the body washing they did notice a hole in her chest. And I don't know if that would be from them trying to revive
Oh, I
her.
don't know.
I don't, which made her think back to what Noelle's boyfriend said. They shot her up with ketamine.
Mhm.
I don't know where they would do that.
Now, how would he know that?
I'm getting, and I'm going to say it, I'm kind of getting the picture that he's not really mentally there,
Mhm.
really at all.
Mhm.
And he says a lot of crazy things.
Mhm.
So, but through this,
That's what it feels like anyway.
I know that Noelle's mom, Bridget, is trying to get these answers. And there's some things that she has stated that she may not ever get justice for this. I believe an investigative journalist that covered this case several years back tried to get answers out of the police, and um, what they told her was that this case will be open for a very, very, very long time.
Mhm.
Why? Why? If it's ruled unsuspicious, then why is it? Why are y'all keeping it open?
Yeah. And a lot of speculation there.
And it makes me wonder if it's not. I
So
don't
it
know.
goes back to Bridget's ultimate goal here. That law I mentioned earlier.
Yes. So it's called Rachel's Law, and
Mhm.
it mimics the law in Tallahassee, Florida, that happened to a girl by the name of Rachel Hoffman, and she got caught up in some things that she
Very
should.
similar to this.
Very similar.
Yeah.
23 years old, a college graduate, getting ready to go to culinary school. She gets caught with a little bit of weed and Valiums. They
Mhm.
put her on a $13,000 buy with
Mhm.
these two men,
Mhm.
and there were some technical difficulties on the way with the wiring and stuff,
Mhm.
and the dealer ended up changing his location,
Mhm.
and she went to that location and was not able to report it to the police because of the wiring and all this,
Mhm.
and she was killed. So, but there's some things about this law that I think are pretty important to point out and would do a world of good for everyone to follow in every state when it
Mhm.
comes to confidential informants.
Yeah.
So, Rachel's Law requires police informants to be informed that their work as an informant cannot guarantee a reduction in any pending criminal charges, immunity, a reduced sentence, or placement on probation. It ensures confidential informants are granted the right to consult with an attorney upon request before agreeing to work as an undercover confidential informant. However, it does not create a right to publicly funded legal counsel.
Mhm.
So you can't go get a public defender if you do this, right? That's what it's saying.
So it sounds like.
Okay.
Mhm.
Requires that all personnel who are involved in the use or recruitment of confidential informants are trained in the law enforcement agency's policies and procedures, and the agency must keep a record of such training.
Yeah.
It requires law enforcement agencies to develop policies for recruitment, control, and use of confidential informants, which must include restrictions on off-duty association and require supervisory approval before a juvenile can be recruited as a confidential informant. And what this is saying is that they hate to be off duty and hooking up with these
Right.
informants or
Right.
doing any business with these informants,
Yeah.
which is really unprofessional. But
So essentially, this law is created to protect people from being made into confidential informants that are one under a certain age.
the next one, that's what breaks it down. It requires law enforcement to consider a person's age, their
Hmm.
maturity, substance abuse history, risk of physical harm, emotional stability, criminal history, record, and whether their role is vital to the success of an investigation.
Hmm.
So,
I still think it should go on to say that if they're under a certain age, their parents have to be involved.
and it does.
Oh, okay.
So that is something else too. You have to have approval to do that. And I don't know what
Approval from who?
I believe a parent. Let me look at this.
No, that's going to be approval from supervisors or
Right,
the
it does not.
court.
So that this is, but it doesn't protect them enough, does it?
That's what
Why
I'm
would you
saying.
use a child?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It limits access to confidential informant records within a law enforcement agency to those who need to review the records or have been required by court to do so,
Hmm.
and enforces a record to be kept of each person who views them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it needs to happen.
Well, essentially, that's what we're looking at is, the creation of Noelle's Law for the state of Missouri.
Yeah. Yes.
Something's better than nothing in this case, and at least they've gone that far.
Right.
And that should exist in every state.
It should exist in every state. Now, I know most states have followed suit with this.
Hmm.
I believe like 20 something,
Hmm.
but it doesn't seem like anything's done here in Missouri.
Hmm.
But another thing about this that Noelle's mom pointed out to me is that there should be an investigation. There
Hmm.
should be an investigation where there's a history of domestic violence in
Hmm.
this relationship. She was found on this property, right, with someone that tried to harm her many times. So, I mean, there absolutely should that to me is very suspicious. It's not unsuspicious at all. It's very suspicious the way she
Hmm.
was found. Even one law enforcement said to Bridget at one point about the way they found her in this tree.
Hmm.
They said, "Your daughter wasn't too bright, was she?" Well, she was bright enough for you to let her work for you and bring you money.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a lot. That's another thing she brought to my attention, and that every single crime scene investigative team should have cameras.
Hmm.
I mean that's ridiculous.
Yep. I ain't buying it though. It's just something easy to be excused. Like we didn't have the capacity to do it. Okay. So again, I honestly think that if for nothing else, people should share this video to maybe help Missouri understand or make those changes. Create this law for the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
So,
And instead, I mean, here Noelle has a daughter here,
yeah,
and a mother and siblings and family that just love her and miss her and just want some answers.
yeah,
They deserve those answers.
yeah. Well, it's a very sad story, and that's part of the reason we tell it to keep it relevant. And I just want to say, you know, to all of them, we sympathize with what you're going through here. And with that being said, I want to remind everybody to like and share these videos that we put out there for this reason. Um, Subscribe to the channel wherever you find it. If it's on YouTube or if it's on one of the podcast outlets like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. It's important to share because, like we said earlier, somebody may hear it and remember something.
Yes. Yes. And I hope that it gets in some people's heads that her life is just as important as anybody else's,
Mm,
and she deserves some dignity
mhm.
in her death.
Yep. Well, again, we appreciate our audience for participating, and we got something new coming on.
Yeah.
So we finally gotten to the point where we can allow membership to our channel.
Yes.
So go on there, go on YouTube and check out our new membership area and bear with us. We're learning as
We're
we
learning.
go.
I think we do like
So,
shout outs and
yeah,
things, merch. I don't, not merch yet, but
lives and stuff
lives
like
and things
that.
like that.
Yeah.
Live chats. Yeah.
So bear with us. We're learning it. I mean, quite literally, it starts with this episode. But go on there and check that out. Again, become part of the community because it's banding together as a community that keeps us strong when we put these messages out, and so that we continue to try to find answers for these families of their lost and loved ones. Um, but we hope to see you again soon, and we appreciate it.
Yes.
So take care. We'll see you again.
Bye.